Hi there, welcome to Cargo Film Presents. I'm Dave.
I'm Dan.
Cargo Film Presents, we talk documentaries and documentaries that we would recommend that you check out. Today we're going to be talking about a Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell.
That's all it was a dream.
The film features rare footage and in-depth interviews. The documentary celebrates the life and of the Notorious B.I.G, aka Christopher Wallace, on his journey from hustler to New York's rap king. It's directed by Emmett Malloy, who had previously directed documentaries on White Stripes and a whole host of music videos, Vampire Weekend, Beck, Black Eyed Peas. And the film is produced by Sean Combs, aka P-Diddy, who was an early Booster collaborator and Wallace's producer and is featured prominently in the film. What do you think, Dan?
Wow, Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell. I thought they should have titled it Biggie, My Friends Have a Story to Tell. Mostly the film is made up of contributions from, excuse me, from his friends and collaborators. And, you know, the film really seems to focus on the prehistory of Biggie. So before he got big and famous. So this is Christopher Wallace, kind of an origin story.
Absolutely.
Take on it. So yeah, I had sort of mixed feelings on this. Going in, I was pretty curious because, you know, there have been a slew of Notorious B.I.G projects, books, documentaries, films, which I haven't seen the biopic myself, but I was curious because this sounded like something very different. They were going to, you know, they had this unprecedented access to the estate, you know, unreleased video archives, as you said, that were in there. You know, they had great access to his mother.
Yep.
So, but I did feel like overall it was a little bit narrow. Like I was I appreciated that it was really sort of focused in on, you know, Christopher Wallace as a young man, and we got to know him, you know, as he's kind of becoming an artist, and he has to make this choice between drug dealing and music, like the two things that seem to be the main focus in his life. But it just sort of seemed to stay there a little bit, you know, and was really kind of um, really sort of narrowly focused on, you know, that particular time in his life, and spent a lot of time, you know, talking about him dealing drugs and being on the street, and which is fine, which is interesting. But I think, you know, that stuff is chronicled in Biggie's music itself in a much more compelling and sort of operatic and epic way, that you're like, well, I should just go and listen to his music instead of maybe watching this film. But that
Right.
was just that, you know, that was my kind of general impression of it. But there were some great moments in it, I have to say.
Yeah, no, I generally agree. The film, it seems like, might have germinated because Damien D. Rock Butler explains how Big instructed him to capture the footage of the audiences whenever they played, to see which songs hit, and which songs didn't. And then he just kept shooting, you know, what essentially becomes a B-roll in the film of them in various places around the world, various concerts, various hotel rooms. And, you know, there's some nice footage there of just Biggie and his crew kind of just hanging out and being themselves. And it makes for a bit of an intimate experience of seeing this artist, you know, as himself. But yeah, as far as music documentaries go, you know, as you said, it acts very much as like an origin piece, and it's and for someone like me that didn't know very much about Biggie's story, it was a nice introduction to the man, you know, his roots, his influences. Music biographies sometimes don't work well because they try to do too much, you know, and they act like a Wikipedia page of the artist's career. the good ones I find are the ones that make choices about telling only a certain facet of an artist's story, and or two, you know. And in this case, the filmmaker Malloy focuses on his upbringing, you know, and his early struggles before he became a big rap star. And so, you know, that's why it does feel like an origin piece.
Yeah, and in that way, I mean, I did appreciate that choice of a kind of smaller canvas. Yeah, I mean, for me, I was just, again, I'm not, uh, uh, you know, someone who knows everything about Notorious B.I.G. in his life. I mean, I think, you know, for some people, maybe there might have been a few new tidbits in there if you were a big fan, but, you know, not really much. It's probably some terrain you know pretty well. So for like fans, maybe not enough. For, you know, someone not familiar with him so much, I guess, yeah, you maybe wanted more of those sort of epic, bigger events and moments in his life. But yeah, there was some really interesting stuff in there. You know, certainly things that I didn't know, and I will say, you know, I like it. The one thing you have to say about Notorious B.I.G. is, I mean, you know, it's very rare that an artist defines a particular period of time. In the mid '90s, you know, he was everywhere and everything. And, you know, I don't even think I owned one of his records, but like I know all the songs and you heard them everywhere and everyone was playing them, you know, in that period of time. So, you know, it was interesting to get some insight into his, as you said, some of his musical influences, particularly his relationship with Jamaica, which again, I
Yep.
wish there was more. I wish there was just some more of that. And then his relationship with his neighbor, who was a jazz musician. There's some
Donald
really kind of,
Harrison. Yep.
yeah, some really, you know, fascinating insights there. But again, you're like, oh, you know, I kind of wanted a bit more of that. And there's just like always just a little bit of that, like, you know, Biggie's, um, his, uh, his affinity for, you know, the sort of old style R&B soul singers, which, you know, you did, you know, hear that and see that in his music. So
Yeah.
there was that, you know, there was those things that just got me going, like, yeah, that's really, like, I would like to, you know, the filmmakers to have dug a bit more into that. But then, you know, you got a lot of also just hyping, you know, led by Sean Puffy Combs, p-diddy, just hyping up Notorious B.I.G., his friends, obviously, and you know that's
Right.
of course they would
Yeah.
do that. But there's a lot of that of like he's the greatest of all time, and he's the greatest. Like there's no
I
question
know.
he's the
Well, you always
greatest.
take that.
Like,
You
all right,
always
guys, come
take that
on.
with a grain of salt whenever you hear stuff like that, right? It's in 1 year, out the
But
other,
I'm like,
right?
he already sold me. I already like, sure,
Sure.
yeah. You know, I'm not a like rap like
Right.
aficionado, but I'm
You're on
convinced
board.
he's one of the greatest MCs and
Right.
rappers of all time. Like, guys, just let's get into something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. I mean, you know, again, it was nice to touch upon those Jamaican roots, and you know, you listen to country music growing up, you know, and you mentioned, you know, his relationships with some of the other residents in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn, where he grew up. You know, Donald Harrison, and where he saw this young Chris Wallace, who had some talent and tried to broaden his world, you know, not only of music, but the arts, and taking him to museums and that kind of stuff. I mean, you know, it kind of fills out a little bit of that persona, which essentially, you know, which they spend a lot of time, you know, is that thug life persona, which is that struggle, right? And the struggle is all over this story, and the unfortunate choices some young people need to take, that includes hustling, you know, in the streets, to one who can make choices that can put him in a better position to succeed. And the film, you know, I think it posits that it was a real distinct possibility that Biggie's life could have gone left if it wasn't for some lucky breaks, right? So like his friend D-Rock encouraging Biggie to show up at that open mic outdoor event in Bed-Stuy, where he
Right.
crushes the other MC, which was taped, right? Which is now, you know, just iconic. And word gets around, and next thing you know, that he's being introduced to Sean Combs, and he goes all in on Biggie. So clearly a guy, you know, that definitely had some talent, but needed some of these breaks, for him to get to that point where he can make the choice to be a person of means and succeed as an artist.
Yeah, that really struck me as well, is because you think, well, just because maybe your entry point to Notorious B.I.G. is he's one of the biggest rappers and artists in the world, but it's just kind of like you're kind of scratching your head, going like, wow, yeah, like even he at that time, he's not convinced that music or the music business is even
Yeah.
a possible means of making money or an income. He's just like, it has to be constantly reassured and convinced by his friends and the people around him to like, no, like you've got this gift and you need to pursue
Right.
music.
But
like, I don't
isn't
think
that
I
always
could be on the
always the
street.
case? Isn't that always the case? Hindsight being 2020. But the reality is, I'm sure even some of those friends are not 100% sure that he's got what it takes. Nobody knows for sure, because you need those breaks. You need you need that entry point that allows his talent to be exposed to a greater public, to confirm those instincts. So yeah, that is a nice element to the film. It really sets that up as him being at a crossroads of sorts of he's this close to this just dumping all of his musical career and going back to the streets. And if anything, that is the kind of crux of his story. One of the other things, what I do like is that it doesn't make a big deal of his murder. I think that story and the whole East Coast, West Coast, war that happened in the 90s has been covered in other films. And so, you're not going to get that here. It's just, really a quick summary of what went down. And, his murder still remains unsolved all these years later, even though there are theories. And I'm not too familiar with what the going theory necessarily is, but, it's certainly tied up to that East-West war that happened in the mid-90s, right?
Yeah, you're right. It didn't seem like the film, had much to add in terms of that, part of his life. And just, yeah, I wasn't particularly interested in that. As we've said, it really did focus on the origin story, and really did focus on, the fact that it was like, social life and street life were intertwined, for Biggie and his crew. And the fact is like um, that sense of community and camaraderie, friendship was incredibly important to him. As you
Yeah.
said, it was a defining moment when his friend gets shot and killed. And like, that's one thing that maybe pushes him closer to doing music.
Right.
And yeah, and that seems to be a real sort of positive focus of the film, is
Yeah.
the friendships in it, that these
Yeah.
guys, and I mean, there's a real funny moment, I didn't know this, where he's like that, he's always talking about this junior mafia, and the guys, who are his friends and his entourage with him on tour, didn't know that he was referring to them. But he's like, you
Right.
guys are my junior mafia. Like, I'm
Right.
bringing everybody, with me, and you guys are all going to be, doing this with me. And I think someone at some point says, like, he would have written a hit record for everyone in his crew, if they would have been hungry enough or stepped up or whatever. And he did do that. I mean, he had obviously collaborations with junior mafia members and Little Kim, which is a weird absence in the film, but but you see, you see this the sense of love that he had for his crew and his community, and which is then um, it is shown when he's murdered, and you see his funeral, and everyone is just, his mother and some of his crew are just surprised at the reaction of the community. I mean, everyone is just out there to support him and celebrating his life, rather than
that footage
tragedy of
is
his
pretty
death.
awesome, showing the motorcade of the funeral going through Brooklyn, and the people turned out in the streets. I mean, it's pretty moving stuff. And and definitely a shout out to his mom, Valletta, who is terrific in describing Wallace at different points of his of his childhood and teenage years and so on. A lot of the time, clearly as a teenager, she didn't know what he was up to, but she's pretty frank about all that, and I like the way Malloy kind of employs and constructs some of that storytelling of the interviews with Valletta and using old interview footage of Wallace as a conversation between the two. Biggie seemed to freely talk about his mom and her struggles, raising him as a single parent, and how much she meant to him. So on a side note, Biggie never met his biological dad. He was a married man, and he impregnated his mother. So it often feels like both mom and son are holding court and advancing Biggie's story, in those early years before he was a big star. I thought that was nicely done.
Yeah, in a way you could see where maybe Wallace got his storytelling chops from. I mean, his mom's
Right.
so incredibly expressive and like present in those moments still. Like, she's like right there, remembering when Christopher, left crack like to dry in his
Yeah.
room, and she threw it out thinking it was dried potatoes or something.
That's right. Yeah.
they're just kind of, yeah, she's an amazing interview subject, and Malloy, I think, really did a nice job taking advantage of that.
Yeah. So there you go. It's a good primer for anyone interested in Notorious B.I.G, his music, his life, his career. But as you said accurately from at the top, you could probably listen to his music and his lyrics and probably get the full spectrum of who he was. But it was nice to see this facet of an artist's career, Brooklyn artist. But that's it. So that's Biggie. I've got a story to tell that you can catch on Netflix. We'll catch you next time.
See you then.